Welcome back to the Aromatic Medicine Garden. I'm Erica Gallatin from the Northwest School of Aromatic Medicine, and today we are going to take an introductory journey into the four elements of earth, fire, water, and air as a framework for unpacking and discovering and exploring the concept of energetics. And in a previous class, I did an introduction to this word energetics and what it means for aromatic plant medicine and what it means potentially in aromatherapy or herbalism as well. And I, in that class, explored this idea of energetics being a metaphorical language of perception, of patterns in the body, patterns in the emotional realm, maybe patterns in the spiritual realm, and also patterns in the plant kingdom, and how we can use this metaphorical language to perceive these patterns, to explore these patterns, to explain these patterns, but also to do matchmaking, right, between, people and plants, right? This is what I like about energetic language. It helps us broaden our perceptions about using aromatic medicine in a supportive way, right? And so the four elements serve as a framework in Western herbalism and Western kind of traditions or a framework, or even a starting place, I should say, for exploring this language, learning this language, and kind of learning what it means. And energetics in general, right, or this idea of a metaphorical language that helps us perceive and translate patterns in the natural world is, a phenomenon that I believe exists across cultures, across time, and every tradition of healing has its own metaphorical language, similar to the ones that are similar to the language that I'm going to be sharing with you in this series about the elements. So one of the things that I talked about in our class on this introduction to energetics in that previous class, I talked about how I see herbal energetics or aromatic, medicine energetics existing on a couple of spectrums, right? And the first spectrum is, what I would consider to be physical, the energetics of the physical world, right? The physical body, of the plants themselves. There's, all of this that's kind of rooted in the tangible matter, right? That's one end of the energetics spectrum. Whereby on the other end, we can start moving into, even the spiritual or emotional realms, emotional and spiritual realms, where energetics and aromatic medicine energetics start to take on potentially a different meaning, right? In this less tangible sort of realm of the human experience, right? So super tangible to less tangible, matter into spirit. And so this is one of these spectrums that I see herbal energetics on. The other spectrum that I experience when it comes to talking about energetics is that, energetics are of a single plant, right? The patterns of medicinal prowess of a single plant can actually vary depending on what tradition you're coming from, depending on what time of, what era or what epoch of history you're talking about, depending on, a different individual, herbalist or aromatherapist perspectives. And so, every single herb in itself has a rich spectrum of energetics to explore. And one of the things that I think is important about this language as I'm introducing us to the elements is that it's very tempting to want to put everything into nice little neat boxes. Okay, this plant is fire, this plant is air, this plant is water, this plant is this plant is heating and drying, this plant is cooling and moistening. We want to put all these things in these nice little neat boxes and draw straight lines between things. But, something that I really like to emphasize is that this isn't always easily a boxable topic. Talking about energetics of plants or energetic patterns in the body isn't necessarily directly boxable, right? So, and one of the things I mentioned also in that other class on this introduction to herbal energetics is that I believe with this spectrum I talked about, from the very physical, tangible, all the way through to the kind of more spiritual realm and the intangible, is that the further away we get from the physical matter of things, the patterns of the physical body, with balance and imbalance, patterns of how the plants interact with the body. The more we move away from that physical realm and into the emotional realm and the spiritual realm, the more individualistic or the more subjective I believe energetics becomes. So while, for example, in the physical realm, something like lavender here might, represent the air element, right? And some of the various and sundry parts and pieces that go to being a plant of the air, or having air-like qualities. That might be, more universal amongst people in this physical realm. And as we start to move into the emotional realm, and then, of course, into the spiritual realm, the experience of lavender for the individual person may start to change. Maybe it's no longer an earth element sort of metaphor experience. Maybe it's more, something kind of like water or earth, for example. That was probably a terrible example, but what I'm trying to say is that I feel like there is a, the more we're talking about the physical way of things, the more universal across bodies, across plants, etc., information is, or energetics is. The more we move into this emotional and spiritual realm, the more I feel things become very individualistic, right? Very subjective, very personal to the individual. And I feel like this is okay. This is part of why, I think it's difficult to, box energetics up and say, this plant is like this, So it just adds a lot of nuance. But this is to me, the final piece I will say about this, in energetics in general. This is, for me, where the art of our work resides. This is the palette of color that we use to paint the relationships between plants and people. And so I really love exploring this idea of it being the artfulness of our work. So we can kind of move away from needing these concrete boxes and very clear delineations around this idea of herbal energetics. So hopefully that makes some sense.